I want to talk about the new rules of real estate. And today's guest is a very, very special individual, and I'm very excited for you to meet her. Her name is Katie Johnson. And she has, I believe, the most unusual job description I've ever heard of anywhere. She is both the Chief Legal Officer at the National Association of Realtors, as well as the Chief Member Experience Officer. Now, those seem diametrically opposed positions. However, with the legal changes that have taken place in the real estate business, and then the overall frustrations the typical realtor has, including their frustrations with NAR, I just can't imagine a better guest to have on our program today. And she's here. She's a great leader, and I think you'll feel more encouraged about the National Association of Realtors after you meet her. Katie, I want to welcome you to our Bold Predictions show.
Thank you very much, Brian. I'm very honored to be here and appreciate the opportunity.
Great. Well, we're going to put a face on this organization. You know, it's easy to kind of rail against the machine when you don't know who's behind it and what's behind it. I'd love for folks to kind of get a feel. You know, here you are, you're the chief legal officer, and then this chief member experience officer seems diametrically opposed. But I thought before we get into some of the technical questions I have for you, why don't you tell the folks a little bit about your background in real estate?
Sure. Yeah, I would say that maybe I was born realtor blue because I grew up in real estate. My born and raised in Springfield, Illinois. My dad was a broker, my mom an agent. And so for the past many, many decades, I have lived through the many transitions, if not roller coasters, as
Mm-hmm.
your meme at the outset indicated, that real estate professionals have navigated through the years. I went to law school not at all expecting to work in real estate. In fact, I studied intellectual property law, but I found my way to NAR as a trademark attorney, and I've been here for the last 16 years.
16 years. And now you are here at the center of the storm. But you know what? Here's what I found is at the center of the storm, when leaders stand up, that's when people build trust. And, you know, I've spent a lot of time, I've done broadcasts on how we got here, the history of all the different characters in the marketplace, where we're at, the Department of Justice, even the FCC getting involved in lead generation that's affected real estate. But I thought maybe let's just dive in. There's still a lot of confusion for folks about the NAR settlement. And again, I've done a lot of detail on this, but I'd love you to share some of the things the actual settlement achieved for members.
Sure. So, at the outset, I understand that many are at different points in their understanding and uh, acknowledgement or acceptance of what the settlement has accomplished and what the future state is. And so I just want to first say thank you very much, Brian, for your continued work on communicating around this to the very high level of professionals that I know you engage with, because you mentioned it just now. Is it's all about building trust, and
Mhm.
the real estate professional is it's all about your relationship, and you are the trusted advisor and the trusted advocate. And at NAR, um, everything that we do is geared towards supporting your success as that trusted advisor, our members'
Mhm.
success as that trusted advisor. And I say all that to say that the settlement, I think, is an opportunity to continue raising your level of professionalism and continuing to be that trusted advisor. What did it accomplish? First, you know, we went into this litigation over 5 years ago with two goals in mind. We wanted to secure a release of liability for as many members, association, MLSs as possible as we could in defending this, you know, decades old practice. And then we also wanted to preserve the choice for consumers regarding the real estate services and compensation. You also mentioned, you know, the first-time homebuyers being ready to enter the market, and I know we'll get into that, but that's just an illustration of how we needed to create some clear path forward in order for our members to have some business certainty and not be subject to additional lawsuits. So as you know, what
Hmm.
did it achieve? We think it achieved both those goals. It has that path forward, but it also shut down a number of copycat lawsuits that were
Right.
proliferating across the country.
Well, that's the big thing. And I think people don't know is that like planes lining up at the airport was the next one and the next one and the next one and the next one. So the fact that the copycat lawsuits got put to bed was huge. Obviously, we were forced into a settlement because we, in the technicality of here was the judgment, now here's the bonds, and the bonds were triple the judgment, and oh my gosh, everybody's going bankrupt. But I think the other thing that I found was very strong in the negotiation was you were able to cover agents whose companies weren't yet covered. So, companies over that 2 billion mark who yet hadn't been able to negotiate their way through the process, you were able to cover the agents. And I found that to be, that was a great negotiation on your guys' part.
Well, thank you. And very important to us because I think as the trade association, again, it's our mission to help make real estate successful. And again, getting a release for as many real estate professionals and our members as possible was critical in accomplishing that. So, as you said, over 1.4 million members were covered and released under this
Mm.
under this settlement agreement, as well as all brokerage businesses with a sales volume of 2022 of 2 billion or less. That
Hmm.
means for the brokerages, the very high end brokerages that we were unable to cover in our release, didn't have to worry about their agents moving or going elsewhere because we did have that release for their members as
Right.
well.
And people don't, looking at the makeup, I mean, 53% of all members of the National Association of Realtors are in unaffiliated companies. So it's a very important thing. And they don't have the big legal teams and so on and so forth. And, my experience, I was in the deposition myself for 8 hours getting grilled. And let me just say this, that's as close to law school as I ever want to get. Um, as we walk through this stuff, and people know me, I'm a plain spoken person and I don't mind taking things on the chin. I just want to kind of, well, and you're a plain spoken person, which is great. Still seems to be a lot of confusion about that now commissions are negotiable. There's tremendous amount of media and political conversation about this. I'm in the business almost 40 years, God forbid. And I've always found that commissions were negotiable. Where did this perception that commissions are not negotiable come from?
Um, You're absolutely right. That's an incredibly infuriating aspect of not just the litigation, the Department of Justice point of view, but also the media reaction and reporting following the
Mm-hmm.
settlement. The NAR policy has expressly stated that commissions are negotiable and are the independent decisions of the brokerage and their agents. So while that has been true, the misconception has led, you referenced, the last 11 years, that the misconception just, I think, led to consumer confusion. And
Mm-hmm.
the allegations are that consumers didn't understand that, or that
Right.
perhaps wasn't their experience.
And
But
and what I've
again,
yeah, go ahead.
no, I mean, you're absolutely right in pointing this out, is that they were negotiable and they continue to be negotiable. And as a result of the settlement, there will be more express communication around
Yeah,
that. And so it
for
gets
sure.
back to building trust through excellent communication.
Well, there's always something good comes out of it, and we'll be talking about that here today, a call to professionalism and so on and so forth. What's happened, like I said in the past, is you'd have these run-up markets where all of a sudden, if you have 20 offers on a property in a 48-hour listing and the property gets settled and nobody really negotiates anything and I don't need a physical inspection and so on and so forth, after a while people are like, what did I pay for? So it's hard to communicate value. And that's happened. Like I mean, I practiced real estate in San Diego in the early 1990s and I had to take year-long listings because the average market time was 181 days. And so people really loved their realtor then. So, people weren't suing realtors in 1990 because of that, or 1992. So it happens, it comes and goes with the speed of the market. And this was just a very, very, very hot market, artificially stimulated to some degree. And then these perceptions grew out of it. I'm going to show you some graphs, Katie, of how we've been explaining this to our membership. The first slide shows, and again, this is specifically about offers of compensation. The first slide shows the traditional way offers of compensation were made. You have a seller who signs a listing agreement with the listing broker. The offer of compensation is connected to that. The buyer signs a buyer broker agreement. Now, again, some people think this is brand new. I've been, like I say, practicing real estate since the mid 80s. I think I started using a buyer broker agreement in 1990, which was the California Association of Realtor form. A lot of people would use it maybe the day before the close of escrow, but I used it with every buyer I ever had. But, some people think this is a shock to the system. And then your offers of compensation were listed on the MLS. You knew going in what to write the contract as, okay, they're offering this compensation, you'd write it in, and so on and so forth. And there were also buyer concessions at that time. Hey, they might give a credit for closing costs or VA points or fees and FHA or whatever else. There were concessions in the listing offered through the MLS. Okay, so the big change in how this is now being done is the offers of compensation cannot be listed through the MLS. The MLS is still a central part of how real estate is going to be done, but the offer of compensation now has to be listed outside. So now you have the same listing agreement, and it is the listing broker's responsibility to come out there and go, okay, whether it's they have a website with the house listed, social media, yard signs, we've seen that, calls directly with the buyer broker, emails, all that kind of good stuff. The buyer broker specifically communicates with the buyer, hey, here's what my fees are, so on and so forth. Available concessions are still a methodology to do this. This is how we've been explaining it. What's your take on this? What would your feedback be? Is this a good understanding of how things are moving forward with regards to offers of compensation?
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And that graphic was easy for me to visualize the future state. And if you notice, I noticed that while the communication around compensation at the outset of listing or advertising, promoting a home is happening off the MLS, there is still a central role in cooperation via the MLS, and meaning cooperation in its the sense that we define it in our code of ethics, and that is to share listings, to show listings, to share information with competitors who will help sell the inventory. And so the MLS continues to play that critical role. And as your graphic said, there's just another touch point of high communication outside of the MLS that we argued for 5 years. The MLS was the most efficient and transparent way to communicate that information. The jury and others, challengers, disagree. And so that information is going to be communicated off the MLS, but it still can be communicated. And as we've argued for 5 years, there's a lot of good reasons for first-time home buyers, for low-income, minority, veteran home buyers, and others who want to have that offer of compensation in order to enter the market and to get into the home buying process.
Well, one of the things that, again, one of the things I was questioned in my deposition repeatedly was, well, buyers are able to find their own houses online right now. They're able to find their own home. This is kind of an opportunity to go direct, and the fee should be very short. And there's some agents buying into that with a cafeteria-style pricing. Oh, I'll charge you $1,000 to show homes and $500 to write an offer. And again, people are entitled to do that however they want to charge fees. What I'm seeing and what I think is being impressed upon the market right now, and what none of the lawsuits seem to be addressing, is that consumers do not, on a giant scale, an overwhelming majority of consumers want to be represented. It's an extremely complex, extremely difficult purchase. There's all kinds of disclosures. There's all kinds of work to be done. This is not like, oh, I'm booking a hotel room on Expedia.com and I can just do it myself. Like, there is so much physical labor to get the ball over the finish line with a real estate transaction, from the loan, from the disclosures, from, working through with the buyer, the seller, the amount of negotiations that actually take place, all the way to the time of closing. Sellers are like, and especially now, in fact, I just had a conversation with one of our guests I'll be talking about named Will Guidara, brilliant author, brilliant guy. And he's like, yeah, I bought a home in Tennessee. And I said, oh, you're selling your property in New York. He goes, well, not right now, I'm not. It's on the market, but it's not selling. And he's like off our recording. He's like, hey, what tips do you have for me? all of a sudden real interested in his real estate professional. So as the market tightens up, as the market becomes challenging, sellers want to be represented and buyers want to be represented. And this is still the compelling thing. And I think it's foolish to ask anybody to work for free. And it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. So this is the point I made when I was deposed. This is the point I make today. I'll be candid with you. I spoke at 7 companies' national conventions this year. And each time I went on stage, the person who was the chief legal officer would say to me, well, don't bring up the commission word. And I would say to them, just so you know, I'm going to communicate the compensation word because this is a business. This is a profession. So let me ask you this. In addition to what we're saying, without being able to go through the MLS, what are the best ways that agents can communicate with one another these offers of compensation?
Really good question, and so much there in your question too. First, thank you for sitting through a deposition. I'm sorry that you had to experience that, knowing exactly what your experience was. So thank you for your service once again. But you observed and here re-articulated another total fallacy and misconception is that buyer brokers don't perform, don't provide services that are worthy of payment. And
Right.
that's mind blowing. And earlier you said I started using the forms in 1990. That's because that's when buyer agency came to be. And buyer agency came to be in the 1990s, if you'll recall. Before that, and in my childhood days of working with my parents, it was sub agency. The buyers did not have representation. Only
Right.
sellers had representation.
Yep.
Consumer advocates, realtor advocates, and others recognize this need for buyers to be well represented by professionals that have their best interests in mind and serve the best interests of the buyers. So we created buyer agency. You started using forms, which is excellent, and others did too in 18 other states. And so that illustrated a need for, so this whole fallacy that buyer agents don't do anything or aren't worthy of being compensated is totally erroneous. For the
Right.
last 5 years, we have been imploring members to speak about their value proposition.
Yes.
We have collateral on nar.realtor, competition.realtor, now facts.realtor that say, 179 ways you're worth every
Right.
penny, or here's another brochure handout of like what your value is. But really, I think that, again, this goes down to high excellent communication by the most successful professionals. They will excel at this. But being able to articulate your value in a way that differentiates your service and your business to the consumer will ensure your continued success. Because
You
again,
bet.
the allegation is that they just don't know, or it's
Yeah.
just confusing. So last thing is, like, when you're talking about that, now how you're compensated must be part of those conversations. The seller
Right.
needs to understand the pros and the benefits of marketing a property with that offer, or why they may not want to. I mean, again, it's their choice, their decision. And the buyer needs to understand all of the options or contingencies available with how you get paid as a buyer representative. So
The
high
biggest
communication.
question, it's great, and more on that in the last part of our prezo. You know where our major initiative is to raise the professionalism in the industry and to train and teach. And we've got fabulous materials we've developed on how to present and communicate your value. Here's a question that keeps coming up in the marketplace. I wanted to get your take on it, which is people sit down, do the buyer broker agreement. Hey, here's my compensation. We're going to go through the channels, whether it's an offer, compensation, so on and so forth, to get these fees paid. However, this is what I'm going to do. The biggest question is people are asking, can that compensation be adjusted? And I'm curious to get your take on that, because that's people like, if I say I'm going to get paid 2.5% of the sales price or a flat fee or whatever amount, or 3% or 1% or whatever, or a flat fee, whatever they decide, can that amount be adjusted once you get to the offer stage?
Yeah, the answer is yes. And to
Right.
help guide thinking around all of these questions that are really good and sometimes very complicated, or hypothetical, is one of the tenets is this resulting in consumer choice? Does this question or outcome result in consumer choice? And so your question
Right.
is, does the consumer have the choice to adjust compensation that they want to pay their buyer broker? Yes, they do. It's a negotiation between the buyer and the buyer broker, and they can
Right.
choose to amend. And quite frankly, I think they will, because you'll see that as a result of this optionality, some brokers will want to not charge something to tour a home, but then charge something later. So of
Yeah.
course there's going to be adjustment there. Some brokers will want, and the we the ability to continue to negotiate your service arrangement
Right.
should be between the buyer and the buyer broker.
Well, we're gonna offer a lot of solutions and a lot of dialogues and a lot of help on this subject for people. It's a real small technical question, but it's the kind of stuff that is hamstringing people. A lot of agents do open houses. You grew up doing open houses with your mom and dad.
Mhm.
You know the drill. So if I meet someone at an open house, do I need to have them sign a buyer broker agreement to show them the house?
No, you do not. And we have, I think, 100 FAQs on Facts.Realtor
Yes.
that I encourage everyone to get familiar with. But this is certainly one of them. You do not need a written agreement. If you're just speaking to, like, buyers do not need to sign a written agreement if they're just attending open houses, and listing brokers or others who are working for listing brokers, or have permission to show an open house for the seller. They
Right.
don't need a written agreement to talk to an unrepresented buyer at an open house.
Beautiful, beautiful. There's a lot of urban legends breaking out all over Kingdom Come,
Yeah.
and a couple of things. And one of the reasons, people are like, "I can't believe you're having someone from NAR on," and the NAR did this. I'm like, "Hey, real leadership. We're addressing it head on," and that's why I so appreciate you being here today. In fact, just like you mentioned, the NAR settlement FAQs. Okay, go to facts.realtor. Pretty easy to find. Facts.realtor, not fiction.realtor, not fallacy.realtor, facts.realtor. And it's there. It's fantastic. It's very well written. It's clearly done. Well done to you and your team. And it kind of spells out a lot of these smaller questions that I pointed out today. Another thing I want to point out that is very helpful, that's been around a long time, is the ABR training. And what's neat, and in a response, and I feel, again, I've had my challenges at NAR being a slow-moving monolith at times, but you guys have kicked into action and done a lot of things very quickly. And one of those things is said, hey, we know ABR is now front and center, how to do this buyer brokerage, how to communicate, how to articulate in your state, and you guys are offering that for free. And so I just think that's fantastic. I don't know how long you're going to continue to do that. I don't know if that's been decided yet or not. But this ABR, if you want to put up that slide
available
there,
through the end of the year.
end of the
Sorry.
year, I think it's a fantastic training. No, that's great. And Casey, if you want to put that up there, you go to become.abr.realtor. Again, I like your URLs. And so that's great stuff. I think it's a great training program. And again, a lot of the trainers involved and so on and so forth are able to personalize it around your city and state. And we've had a number of our affiliates and relationships go through the ABR training here very, very, very recently. So, Katie, I just want to share this with you. First of all, thank you. I know this was not what anybody was looking for. Once you get into the legal stuff, then you get settlements and juries, and then all of a sudden you're dealing with, it's no longer about what's right or what's wrong or should have been won on appeal or anything like that. It gets down to settlements and dollars, and lawyers know how to use that. And at the end of the day, I think it was a bad situation that got bad, very bad quickly. I think you guys have made the best of it. I think you guys have made some great moves since then. And we're also here to try to support the membership in regards to being more professional. I just want to thank you for being here today and taking the time. I think it's great to see a fresh face who's bringing these two roles together where, hey, we got the sword with the legal side and we got the shield and the membership experience, and you handle it very well. And I just want to thank you for being a part of this today. And any last words you have for the tens of thousands of people tuning in today that are faithful members of the NAR?
I want to say thank you to you, Brian, for helping educate and communicate around all of these really difficult issues, and helping us all see the opportunity that can arise out of these circumstances as you've described them. And to our members, I want to say thank you too. Thank you for your continued work in professionalism, your support of change and helping us navigate these waters, but most importantly, how you treat consumers. Because what you do in the field is a reflection of what we are protecting and fighting and shielding at the national level. So, as a daughter of two parents, I just have two realtors. I just have the utmost respect for your profession, and know that this is part of that roller coaster. I really appreciated that calm real estate professional realtor on that roller coaster, because progress happens in loops and not a straight line. And you've
Yeah.
been here, and we're going to get there. And just thank you.
Well, thank you for participating in our bold predictions today. It's great stuff, great information. Thanks for the resources, the facts, the ABR. And we're going to be sharing with folks now our solution of how we intend to raise the bar for the entire industry.